Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the cafe. We're particularly delighted to have so many new subscribers this month. Cafe is our monthly leadership magazine, picking interesting topics and interviewing successful leaders for their tips. Our hope is that you find this useful and inspirational in your own leadership challenges. As you know, Alembic helps organizations to discover and gain alignment around their options for improvement and change, and then has a wide range of support options for delivery, including M&A, board support, strategic training, coaching, amongst other things. And I think the cafe is a nice way to connect with you all and share our thinking. We'll be really pleased to have any suggestions from you for subjects and for improvements to this, or for people that you would like us to interview in the future. And just a little bit of information, we've got quite a few of these recorded now, and we've just set them up as a YouTube channel. And we're just thinking about connecting with a podcast and doing some sort of shorts to pick up some of the really inspirational things that leaders say on the show, which is kind of a quick way to access things and maybe helpful for the wider team. So just check back on that. Quick intro from me in a second, and then we're going to move to the sort of dish of the day, which is to interview Neil, who's Sheriff of London. I'm going to wrap up with some comments on leadership from a slightly different angle, and then take questions. Summary around about 9 o'clock, and then you can go back to your desks. And I'm just before we start, hope everybody's had a reasonable journey in this morning. It was absolutely crazy weather out there, and I'm surprised that we actually made it here, if I'm honest. So just by way of introduction, I think the background to the interview today is about organizations leading in their own right. So this first line of the slide here, organization performance emerges from skilled people in clear roles coordinating together for a purpose. That word emergence is an interesting one that many of you will have heard. It gets talked about in physics or in science. Some scientists believe that our consciousness is an emergent property of having 20 or so evolved intelligence all crammed into one head. And what happens when they all come together is we get this thing called consciousness. And organizations are like that too. For example, if you think about something simple like the army, and you might need a tank team, and maybe you need 5 skilled people to drive a tank, and you put one person in there, the tank won't work. You put 7 people in there, it's too crammed and they can't operate. So 5 is the right number. And with 5 skilled people sitting for their role in the right place in the team, the tank becomes really effective. And if the army can create 100 tanks, it gains power by that, strength by that, which is more than any of the individuals could deliver on their own. And that's an emergent property. It's a very simple idea, really. And it could be purely commercial, but my point, and you may disagree with me on this, is that all organizations, if they've got that right, and it's not easy to get that right, you can have people badly organized, but if you get the organization right, you get the right numbers in the right spots, the organization gains emergent power. And my view is that because of that, all organizations have a responsibility to lead. It's very simple for that power to be hijacked by one or a few individuals for their own individual purposes. And so I think for me, it's a mistake for organizations to see themselves as purely commercial. They always need to have a leadership objective. And that leads me into the presentation. So today is about an ancient corporation and how it leads, and how duty and tradition can keep it free of the powerful, so it can retain its independence as an organization and lead in its own right. And that's why I'm absolutely delighted to have Neil Redcliffe on the panel this morning to talk about his experiences and his role as Sheriff of London. Welcome, Neil.
Oh, hi. Morning. Good morning, all.
Morning. So tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, goodness, right. Well, really, you and I got to know each other probably 12, 15 years ago, Nick. I'd had a property development business. We specialized in working on period buildings. And so we worked together back then. I changed that business. That was actually 20 years ago. I co-founded a foreign exchange business called Currencies Direct, and spent the last 20 years of my business career working in Currencies Direct and building a very successful business which I sold 2 years ago. I've always had a sort of interest in the City of London. That goes back nearly 40 years, actually. I've been a liveryman for 37 years, a liveryman of the Basket Makers Company, and I'm a liveryman of a number of other companies. But I've got a great interest, which, as I said, goes back a long time. I became an alderman in 2009 and sheriff in 2017. So I'm currently a sheriff of the City of London.
Living at the Old Bailey, which is really interesting. So, you also got me into livery, which I completely love, and I think you invited me along to a wonderful lunch at one point. We talk about lunching in a minute, but just tell us a little bit about the city and how it works, and why did you decide to take that career further and go into being sheriff?
Well, the interest was my grandfather was a common councilman of the city, an elected member of the City of London Corporation, and so. Going nearly 40 years back, I went electioneering with him, and I got to know lots of the people who are involved with the City of London Corporation, and I took a real interest, and eventually decided it was time for me to get elected. The City of London Corporation is a really unusual organisation. It has it carries out the function, well, part of its function is to carry out the duties of a local authority, a London borough. But it really is not a London borough. It's a very ancient organisation. It didn't get reorganised in the 1880s when all the London boroughs were formed into similar sort of shapes they are now. It traces its sort of history back to 1067. So it's getting on for nearly 1,000 years old. 1067. We all know your history that in 1066 William the Conqueror came to this country and pretty much took the country over. All the land changed hands. It went from the Anglo-Saxons to the Normans. But he had a different view on the city, and he looked at the merchants of the City of London who'd been trading very successfully for hundreds of years, and decided to grant them their rights, privileges, and customs that they'd previously had. So, in other words, he didn't change the city merchants. The reason he didn't change it was because they were actually very good at generating wealth. And William the Conqueror was interested in wealth because he was interested in taxation. So he always saw the city as a source of revenue for his monarchy. He reminded the city of his power by building the Tower of London right next to the city, just to make sure that the city knew where the military and political power stood. But the city and the monarchy and the sort of power of the monarchy has been sort of negotiated over hundreds of years, and the city has gradually increased its sort of its position by electing a Lord Mayor, by electing sheriffs, etc., etc.
I think it's so interesting. I can't believe how timely this interview is with the Radio 4 commentary this morning about President Macron actually going to Sandhurst, which is kind of like maybe in some ways equivalent to the Tower of London, and talk about bringing the Bayeux Tapestry over. It's a kind of really amazingly, serendipitous timing today. But there you go. How interesting. So tell me a little bit about your role as sheriff then. I was fascinated to come over to the Old Bailey and see the interconnection with the judges there, the murder trial. Tell us a little bit about that and how that works.
Yeah, well, the sheriff is elected. It's an office of 1 year. There are in fact two sheriffs of the City of London. We are elected in June. We come into office in September. So I've been in the role for the last sort of 3.5 months. Our primary objective as sheriffs is to support the Lord Mayor of the City of London, and the Lord Mayor's primary objective is to support the objectives of the City of London Corporation. Now, it's a really unusual organisation in that it has a primary objective is to promote what it always did, which was wealth creation. So the city is there, the City Corporation is there to promote financial and professional service industries of this country. So it's not just the City of London, it's not the Square Mile, it's not London, it's the UK, and it has as its purpose to promote those industries in this country and worldwide. So the Lord Mayor, who is also in office for just 1 year, is the principal spokesman for the City Corporation and is the principal ambassador, and will spend about 100 days of the year in office, travelling overseas, taking business delegations overseas, meeting businesses, meeting politicians and other leaders across the world to promote this country and to promote trade with this country. So it's an important role internationally. We use the facilities of the corporation to give hospitality to business delegations and politicians and all sorts of people who visit this country, both from around the UK and internationally. So again, with that primary objective of promoting those industries. And those industries, they matter, and they matter for reasons of employment. The industries in the UK employ 2.2 million people. Also, in terms of the ability to the tax take from these industries is in the region of £72 billion, which is enough to pay for nearly was about 80% of our education and training budget, and about half the cost of our national health service. So that's a hell of a lot of tax. It's also a huge export industry, and it exports in the region of 76 billion. So it's one of our greatest exports. So it's important, it matters, promoting these industries.
It's amazing, isn't it? I think when you think about the city as a cluster, with all the different facilities that it has for global trade, I mean, in a way, I think it makes sense that the technology marketplace in the City of London and digital marketplace has grown so well and become such a sort of global focal point for developing technology, because technology business is, almost by its nature, instantly global these days. Yeah, and so yeah. London and some of the other technology centres like Cambridge and Oxford and other places in Scotland, etc., are great. But London has that incredible power of bringing the resources together to help support it. Yeah. And that infrastructure piece is something that's very important to the corporation, I think, isn't it? Making it a great place to work.
I think the word cluster is really important, and this is where you have lots of businesses in the same sort of sector which are relatively close together. For example, the insurance industry around Lime Street. When you have these clusters, you have real good competition and huge innovation, which makes these businesses, world beaters. They can compete on a world basis because of that sort of competition and innovation. I was sort of mentioning about sort of supporting the Lord Mayor. I'm going to be going to Australia and New Zealand for 10 days with the Lord Mayor coming up in February. And what we are doing is we're taking a business delegation of fintech businesses. These are young, very energetic, very talented people who have got some really good businesses, which are early sort of stage. And then we're taking them over to Australia to meet lots of financial institutions, banks, and other technology businesses to look at selling our technology from this country, and also seeing what they are doing, finding out what they can, where we can collaborate and sort of cooperate. So yeah, we try to support the tech industries in this country. We do a good job of it as well, actually.
I think it's really incredible. So fantastic. Guys listening, put in your questions. There's a question area. Neil will be happy to answer questions at the end. I think it's a fascinating topic. And to be honest, in 15, 20 minutes, we're not going to do it justice this morning. But we've heard, I think, there, really resonantly a little bit about the infrastructure of the city and how it works as a cluster, and how its civic leaders, including the Lord Mayor, the Sheriff, the other officers, use that office and role to lead. They are putting their shoulders to the wheel to try and lead ambassadorially and from the business community globally, and try and create opportunities for UK PLC to be successful, which is great for tax, for our state, for jobs, for purpose, for meaning in life, etc. And I'm just kind of interested in the protection of the corporation. It's been around for over 1,000 years. And it was really interesting to me coming to listen to the murder judges. I spent a bit of time in one of the trials over the Old Bailey with you, Neil. And the judges were saying that a key part of the way it operates is that the organisation prevents executive interference. And so they have independence, judicial independence. And you can just see how important that is. So just tell us a little bit about how it prevents itself from being hijacked. What are the methods it uses?
Yeah. just, I mean, I didn't. I must just tell you a little bit about the Old Bailey and why I'm there, and then I'll come back to the sort of corporation, because the City of London Corporation that owns the Central Criminal Court. It's quite an ancient sort of relationship, and you found that the great cities in the United Kingdom used to build and have a close sort of connection with their courts in terms of buildings and in terms of pride in those buildings. Sadly, that was all reorganised some decades ago, and the city still has this relationship with the Central Criminal Court. So the sheriffs of the City of London, who have a relationship with it as part of the judiciary going back to Anglo-Saxon times,
Wow.
are able to reside at the Old Bailey, and we use it. Really, we look after the well-being of the judges by providing a very good building. We give them lunch every day, which is unusual. Most judges today have to go out and get their own sandwiches. We give them lunch, and what we're able to do from that is bring people from all over the world and all over walks of life in to tell them about the city, and also to tell them about the judiciary. And we're very fortunate in the UK in having the best judiciary in the world. It is independent. You get to become a judge. It's not because you've trained as you do in France. You can go to law school to train as a judge in France. You get appointed as a judge in the UK because of your integrity and your reputation, and that's a very, very hard one. And so you don't get there easily. They only get the people who have got the best value systems and appointed. So we're very fortunate to have this very close sort of connection with them. In terms of the city corporation, in terms of power of sort of leaders in the corporation, well, I think I've mentioned that the Lord Mayor is only appointed for 1 year, and the sheriffs are only appointed for 1 year. So you don't get individuals sort of hijacking. You have a system there that is, the office is the point. The point is that the office of Lord Mayor is the important bit. That is the continuity. That is the thing that changes. That continues over time. When you have a new Lord Mayor each year, they have, they can't take over. They do a hell of a lot of very good work, and they do that because they've been preparing for it for a very long period of time. They will have been to become Lord Mayor. You will have been sheriff, so you will have been working very hard to get to sheriff and in your year of office, and then you either have a year or two between being sheriff and Lord Mayor, where you would have done extraordinarily long, hard preparation work, so that when you become Lord Mayor, you hit the ground running, you deliver as much as you possibly can in your year of office, and then you're out. And when you're out at the end of it, what happens is you have a system called PERDA, and this means that the Lord Mayor, when he's finished his term of office in November, is actually not welcomed back into the city for 6 months. So they don't really get involved for 6 months. Once they're through that 6 months period, then past Lord Mayors are asked to help. They're still involved in the sense that, if the Lord Mayor is travelling overseas, then a past Lord Mayor might be asked to step in and deal with a particular duty in the UK. So they're never really not involved, but the power doesn't continue through the individual.
It's wonderful. I think it's really good. And in a minute, I'm just going to draw sort of parallels back to business life and how to handle these things in business life and where the resonances and relevances are. Just with a minute left while we're just chatting, the other part of I think these things are all too easily taken for granted, and it's actually when you dig into what goes on in the City of London Corporation and in judges, for example. Yeah. You appreciate just how important our privileges as citizens are by contrast with other states where this independence and fairness is not maintained. Sometimes people struggle to make a point of democratic ways or perhaps British ways as a particular version of democracy, but this separation of duty and time-limited office and checks on the executive, which are sort of here, shown in the City of London Corporation, are fundamental to our freedoms, and it just is so good here in a way you could almost not notice it. and take it for granted, but it's fundamentally important. And I just wanted you to reflect on the, because civic life is about volunteering, really. No one does this for money, or maybe doing it for money, but, you know, and there's a big charitable kind of part to it as well. So maybe just
well, none of the elected members of the corporation. So you have the Lord Mayor, the Court of Aldermen, the sheriffs, and the Common Council. Well, none of them are paid. So that's the sort of starting point. The next point is we don't have party politics in the City of London Corporation. I'd say sort of 95% of the people who are elected stand as independents. And that really sort of matters. It means that the corporation, when it is carrying out its work, it has to interrelate with government. It does a great deal of work with other local authorities in London and central government in terms of promoting London, promoting the UK. But it doesn't have a political angle, and that means it's really, really easy to get work done and to do. You know, we can work with any political party, any government in power. And have a very, very good sort of dialogue and get a great deal of work done. So I think that's quite an important part of how the corporation works. You mentioned sort of charity. The Lord Mayors run a charity in their years of office. This has historically been a 1 year sort of charity of supporting maybe 3 or 4 charities over 1 year. That has changed, and we're working on a sort of continuum of, and the current Lord Mayor, Alderman Charles Bowman, has started this initiative where they're actually supporting 3 charities for 3 years, and they're really good charities. They're looking at mental health in adults, mental health in children, and trying to help those youngsters who, teenagers with nothing to do and no place to go. So the 3 very important needs in society, and they're very good charities which are supported. So again, the sheriffs support the Lord Mayor, and that the Lord Mayor has a huge number of people who volunteer and help to raise funds for these charities. And they're very ambitious actually, and they have an aim over the next sort of 3-year cycle to make a difference to the lives of 1 million people, and that's ambitious, and it's great. We also run a charity at the Old Bailey. To look at the needs of people who are in prison, to try and help them with training and education so that they can reintegrate into society and work, most importantly, find work when they come out. But the charity that we work on also helps prisoners' families who often suffer great hardship when spouses are in prison. So yeah, there's a very important charity and sort of volunteering side to what goes on in the city. And that's just actually, what I've mentioned there is just the tip of the iceberg. The corporation has a fund called the City Bridge Trust, which is giving to city, to sort of London charities, all the boroughs around London, helping charities in those areas. And they're giving in the region of about 20 million a year. And then you've got the delivery companies, and the delivery companies spend a great deal of their voluntary work and money, which is sort of collected for charitable purposes, on education in the region of about 50 million a year. So there's an enormous amount of good work that goes on in the city, in London, in the UK.
I think that's absolutely amazing stuff and really inspiring. And just thank you for that. And I know you're happy to stay around for questions. We've got a few questions coming through from people. So I'm just going to take on the discussion, Neil, and sort of try and highlight some of the key points around organisational power and purpose, and then maybe we can come back to questions in a few minutes. Sure. I think that's really interesting. That in a way the culture of civic contribution that the City of London Corporation embodies also encourages that giving back in terms of charitable support. But the key points here for me, just on the PowerPoint, government and governance, really important ways of putting check on corporations and on individuals. So the law, but then also having that independence built into your corporate structure, so there is proper oversight of some of the key elements and levers of power and influence within the business to keep its purpose on track and to prevent the individual from personalizing it and taking it over. That idea of separation of institutions. So Neil's point about what happens with the judges, And I definitely heard that when talking to them, that they are free of interference. And you can be quite cynical about these things, but actually watching the murder court trials go through, and there's real independence and fairness in there. Everyone is heard. And I think one of the things that came through really strongly was that on all sides of the case, one of the things they did say was, I have my chance in court. I have my chance to be heard. It was, they did listen to my side of the story. And so you do get that freedom from executive interference, which, we can see in other countries around the world, just causes horrific problems for citizens. It makes it very difficult for people to live purposeful lives, live with freedom, live with opportunity. So very, very important. It must be cherished. But then think about your company. How does that work inside your company? How can you create that independence? We've heard lots of stories about individuals in positions of control, even in smallish commercial companies, really abusing their power over other people in the organization. The abuse of power trope at the moment is pretty horrific, and so it does demand the individuals to hold to that idea of duty and office, rights and obligations, and this concept of rotation and oversight. And I think also this concept of tradition and written constitution forms a key part of that. So I think they're really important things. And what they do is that when you've got your team together and you've got the right numbers and everyone's playing in the right role, just thinking about that from how you create power in your organization, you need individuals to be able to play a couple of roles and be interchangeable. You need that defense in depth. But when you play in front of the crowd under pressure, you need those 15 people to stay in post. You can't have your fullback, playing too far out of position before you start to lose. And so that concept of where do I sit and holding to my duty and maintaining my obligations is a bit of an old-fashioned sounding concept, but actually thinking even about rugby is fundamental to generating that emergent power. And the individual may not be able to see that, understand that, know that. They just need to play their spot and play with the people immediately around them. But the consequence of playing in your role and sticking to your duty and holding your obligation is that the team itself becomes really purposeful, and that can be pure. So it's worth thinking about that, how organizations can lead and how they're more than the sum of the people. It's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's really true. And how organizational capabilities emerge. And, do you have that clear focus and purpose? Do you have that coordination of roles and the clear delineation of roles within the organization? It can be very specific. The number can be really important in that. So actually getting it right is tricky, as I'm sure many of you know. So I kind of think that's quite an interesting subject and worth reflecting on. And so here are some ideas of different types of leadership, and it's not the single thing here, but we've got the City of London there. European Medical Medicines Agency is a sort of a quango, if you like, but a really powerful organization which has been defensive of society against the sort of spread of epidemics and disease, and in promoting new inoculations and public health. Tesla, I think, is really interesting because, it's a corporation, it has a commercial purpose, but a leader in technology innovation in a way, really having an opinion and a position on the innovation side of the market. And then similarly in the UK, Rolls-Royce, it's in the news this morning, but absolutely at the forefront of leadership in terms of engineering innovation. And in a sense, almost a state institution. It's so important in terms of its technology capabilities that as a society, we protect it. It's one of those organizations which is almost too big to fail. So just having a think about that before we get back to questions for Neil. Do we understand power in our organization? Do we use it wisely? So are we using our position? Do we understand what position means and the office itself as a separate thing from us? And do we personalize it and feel like it is us rather than what it is, which is an office that we're holding for others? What about given authority, when people give us power over them and accept our leadership? That gives us power. Do we use that power wisely, or are we using it for our own ends? Are we leading or are we leaders through our organization? Can we lead with others? Can we share leadership? I think that's a good sort of touchstone for whether you've kind of got this concept. If you can share leaders with others in your organization, then you're not personalizing it too much. You're running the company. You're not running it for me. So are we simply seeking to be the leader for position, for ego, for status, for what it gives us? you can tell there's always a pull for that in this. As soon as people get that opportunity of power, the old cliches count about power corrupting. And just thinking about what's the purpose of your organization, do you know what it is? And are there several purposes? What leadership purpose could it serve to its community, its stakeholders, and its people? And have you got that clear in your mind? And are you, observing and honoring that possible purpose? Just really interesting questions about organizations as leaders rather than us and how we can support that. So summary from me is just what one thing will you act on from today's workshop? A few little things to come back to as we run up towards the end and get to questions. So there's go and have a look on our YouTube channel. A couple of lovely examples there. We had a wonderful presentation from Professor David Dunaway on how to run innovation in surgery with children, and a great presentation last time from Nikista Harlequin's coach on coaching for performance. And there's many more up there. Slides from today and the recording will be up there shortly, so you can subscribe to the channel and watch them, share them with your team. It's a free magazine, so please make most use of it as you can. And just a quick reminder, those of you who haven't booked in, our directors, our leaders forum is next week at St Dunstan's place over in the city, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're interested in that, just come and let us know. And there will be an e-zine coming up soon. So thank you very much for attending. I just wanted to go back to the questions. So got a great.
Can I just sort of add very quickly? There are two sort of points I wanted to make. One of them, what gives our country and our city and our financial services and associated industry great strength is the rule of law in this country. It's something that has been fought over and developed over centuries and centuries, and the British law is English law is extremely good law, which is why many countries want to do their contracts in English law. It's a great export for us in terms of our lawyers working sort of overseas and doing contracts in English law. So we have a great strength there. The other side is sort of values, and this is something I didn't have a chance to mention. The Lord Mayor's programme and his initiative this year, and it's always a continuing sort of initiative of Lord Mayors, but it's about integrity. The current theme is trust in business. This is something Charles Bowman has been working on, his partner in PwC, and he's been working on it for years, and it's really been taken up in a great way by the corporation, which is trying to promote businesses to build trust. So having that really sound sort of value system in the corporation, in the city, in financial services industries is fundamental. And financial services are not trusted. This is that the research shows that after the global financial crisis, people do not trust financial institutions, and it's fundamental that we can build that trust again. So that is. There are two other sort of points I wanted to make, but I will take questions.
I think they're completely resonant with the thrust of the argument today, and my point here, which you may or may not agree with, but my point is it is down to, ultimately it does come down to the individuals and that shared culture of integrity, and preventing power from being misused in this way. Got some great questions. So first one here is about pressure. So huge pressure on city workers this millennium. Working days getting longer, expectations to participate in family life and working life growing. And the question is, has this sort of time pressure emerged at your side of things, Neil, with a reduction in the number of younger people volunteering for civic duty? Is there a reduction?
I actually, our experience is that the younger people are getting elected to Common Council now, which is a very good thing. Now they are able to, and these are all people who are in work. They are able to convince their employers that they are doing, very worthwhile work as being a member of the corporation. It's giving back, and many companies are supporting people to do that. Just as many companies are great supporters of reservists who sign up and have to do training and sometimes have to operate for our armed forces overseas. Many employers do recognise the importance of that, but also the benefits, because these people who get elected as Common Council, these people who go and fight overseas, learn all sorts of new skills which they bring back to the employers. So we're positive. We do get a lot of young people who are coming forward and giving up a great deal of time to do the good work that the corporation does.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, we certainly see that too. I think quite a lot of companies sort of bemoan the lack of leadership in the youngsters coming through, but don't see it. I think there's plenty there, and needs to be encouraged. The other question here is, how do we keep the city independent and discourage political parties from supporting candidates in the city elections? How do we keep that independence?
Well, I would say our electorate for the members in the City of London Corporation is about 30,000 people, and that's made up of about 10,000 residents of the City of London, and about 20,000. There are about 20,000 business votes. These are allocated. The city, not many people live in the city, about 10,000 residents, and then every day we have about 400,000 people who come to work each day. And so we are really, really keen for businesses to put people forward to go onto the electoral roll to vote for members. And so we take this as a really important right, and we would encourage residents and businesses to think really carefully about who they elect. And those who are putting themselves forward under a political ticket, they're coming at it from a different direction. They're not coming at it from the common sort of good from a long period, over such a long period of time of independence. I mean, if we did get political parties in the City of London Corporation, it would change the organisation dramatically. So I'm a great believer in, vote, find out who you're voting for, find out what whether they are standing as independents and they're coming at it as an independent. And if they're not, it's not my position to say, but don't vote for them.
Yeah. I think key thing there is to get information about. I think it's for a lot of people today listening to this, the history and the function of the City of London Corporation would have been a bit of a mystery. So really fascinating. Thank you very, very much for being with us this morning. Thank you for answering those questions for the audience. I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed it. I certainly have, listening to you, Neil. And thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. I think the next one, I haven't advertised it, it's on the 15th of February. It's going to be on the magic numbers in business, about how to get those sort of organizational figures right, not the financials, but the key things that affect you in the sort of mathematics of business. So kind of interesting, niche kind of topic, but stuff that people don't often know about. So it should be interesting. So check back in for that. And we hope you have a lovely day. And thank you very much for tuning in to the Strategy Cafe in January. And see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks.